And welcome to another edition of Heavy Hands. I am your host, Connor Rebush. With me, as always, Phil McKenzie.
Oh.
Hello, Phil. How are you?
Not doing too bad. Cold, but yeah, not too bad at this time of year.
How cold are we talking? This is a good way to start a show. People love to hear about the weather.
Mild.
Yeah.
By whatever Midwestern standards are.
I knew you were bullshitting.
Yeah.
As soon as you said, it's like when it gets cold over there, it's like your best weather is like as good as like as average Seattle weather, but your worst weather is like San Francisco. You're pretty temperate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but also we've got the whole thing where like if we have any kind of like snow or anything, it just always instantly shuts the city down in its entirety. Like leaves on the tracks is a common one for like the trains.
Well, I will tell you that when
just being generally temperate means that any deviation just shuts London down pretty much.
When I went to bed this morning, it was quite late or quite early, depending on how you look at it, and it was 20 degrees Fahrenheit. I had glanced at my phone. Minus 6.6 Celsius. So that's
okay. That is quite chilly.
That's the temperature we're dealing with here, you fucking baby. Everybody in the comments pop off about how Phil's cold weather is fake.
But also there's going to be people in the comments popping off about how your cold weather
That's
is
true.
fake.
There's going to be some dude from Nova Scotia.
Nebraska or something.
Yeah. Hey, you fucking coward, you. That's not cold. That was more Chicago. All right.
I don't know. I didn't think it was bad.
Thank you. I am from the Midwest, after all. I can do a little northern cities accent. Well, welcome, folks, to the show. An even more disjointed introduction than usual, but hey, what's the harm in that? We're in a good mood. We have a good fight card to talk about, finally. Felt like we had a miserable spring going into the summer, slight rebound, pretty good quality for a minute, and then boy, they just couldn't keep it up. Cards started to fall apart. More Apex cards. But now we're back. We're going to a destination, Austin, Texas, in fact, and the UFC is finally too embarrassed to put together a card that the Texans won't be able to get drunk and hoot at. We've got Beneil Dariush versus Arman Tsarukyan in the main event of this Fight Night card, also featuring Jalen Turner versus Bobby Green. A fantastic matchup, especially given that it is a replacement for what was intended to be a non-title 5-round fight between Dan Hooker and Bobby Green. I think that would have been the second or third time they've ever done a non-main event, non-title 5-rounder. I love seeing those. Unfortunately, we lost that, but hey, Turner, Green, still a great fight. Also on the card, Rob Font is greeting Davison Figueiredo in his Bantamweight debut. And there's a lot of other good stuff on here, too. Sean Brady, Kelvin Gastelum. I'm even weirdly interested in Clay Guida, Joaquim Silva. Misha Tate, Julia Avila is interesting. Really quite a good Fight Night card with a fantastic main event. So,
you know what else this card has going for it?
What's that?
It's got like one fight above middleweight, and it's right towards the bottom, and it's Iho Pateria at like heavyweight.
That is a very
main
good
card is just filled with like lightweights and bantamweights, and that's awesome.
No fucking wonder it feels like such a great lineup, right? There's one middleweight fight on the main card, and I could take that.
Yep.
Wow.
And it's it's putting the action fighter like opening thing that you have on like well balanced, well made cards. It's got Bunhele Soriano and
always fun to watch.
There's going to be punching and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And and then it goes into like the actual quality, which is genuinely very good.
Mm-hmm. Yep, can't argue. Well, let's cut the shit then and get into the main event. Beneil Dariush, Arman Tsarukyan. I'm just happy to see Tsarukyan getting a matchup. Unfortunately, it took Beneil Dariush getting probably finally ousted from the title picture, I have to assume. But this is a matchup that probably vaults Tsarukyan into the title picture. And honestly, I kind of feel like it seems like if he does get a win here, it has worked out pretty well for him because he got a huge cred with like nerds like us for losing super competitively to Islam Makhachev, who only got better after that point and was already exceptionally good. And then one loss we both thought was a robbery to Mateusz Gamrot. Otherwise, has not worked his way up the rankings too quickly, and I think has continued to come along and improve and get more comfortable even up to his most recent fight, and still has some growing to do. So I kind of think ultimately we will look back and say Tsarukyan was given just exactly as much time as he needed to turn into the best version of himself. And yeah, what do you make of this matchup versus Dariush? Too experienced, too crafty. Is it Islam Makhachev all over again?
Yeah, I mean, this is a super well matched up one, I think. Because I think this, more than a lot of the fights, is set to mark what the ceiling of Tsarukyan's style is.
Yeah.
Because if he'd gone in to fight pretty much anyone else apart from, somehow jumping straight to a title shot against Islam, there's a solid chance that he just could have run his A game, and his A game would have been enough. And, he can just take Dustin Poirier or Justin Gaethje or, probably even, frankly, Charles Oliveira down a whole bunch and control them on the ground and just win that way. And we'd never get to see sort of the limits of how that what that style is capable of.
He might still have had the exact same split decision loss to Mateusz Gamrot along the way, but not convincing. We would have overlooked that.
Yep. But also, but this fight is a different one to many of those, because Beneil Dariush can wrestle good and can scramble good and can stop takedowns good. And everyone else in the lightweight, top 10, aside from, Gamrot and Islam, Gamrot isn't in the top 10 anymore, I don't think, does not tick at least one of those boxes.
Yeah. Gamrot is on a par as a defensive wrestler and offensive wrestler and scrambler. Still doesn't have as complete, I think, a grappling game as Beneil Dariush. But his whole game is slightly dysfunctional. So he only sort of makes for a similar matchup to Beneil in one very specific regard. It is the regard that tests Tsarukyan's core style. But otherwise, the only other guy in the division, I think, capable of doing that, Tsarukyan has already lost to, was Islam Makhachev. It was a long time ago.
Yep.
But Beneil, unlike somebody like Gamrot, has a much more complete and well-rounded game to complement the fact that he seems like a hard counter to Tsarukyan's, clearly Tsarukyan's best skill set. That he is very dangerous everywhere else the fight goes, which is something you can't really say about Mateusz Gamrot. Or even Islam at the time that he fought him. So yeah, it seems like a really, and like I said, a very well timed, because he's had a lot of time to develop, fought a bunch of different styles, but it still does not feel anything like a sure thing to me that Tsarukyan's going to win just because he's the young up and comer. It feels like a huge test.
I mean, honestly, I might have thought that, and I probably did. We were relatively confident in picking Gamrot over Dariush. I would have thought that before we saw Dariush Gamrot.
100%.
Before we saw how ironclad Dariush's takedown defense looked in that fight.
Yeah, and the fact that Dariush, in a shorter fight, was able to beat Gamrot up better. Like, essentially, they had this. He and Tsarukyan both had the same matchup with Gamrot. They were both just way too hard to take down. And when they did go down, way too good at scrambling to keep there. Not that Gamrot would have kept them there, even if he had been given the opportunity.
Yes.
But Dariush, all the time around him completely breaking Gamrot's wrestling game, was spent building pressure and crushing him on the feet, something that Tsarukyan did not do. Right? I think Tsarukyan outstruck Gamrot, but Dariush fucked him up, in addition to shutting his wrestling down completely by the end. So, if anything, I don't know. Seeing that fight alone makes me think maybe Dariush beats Tsarukyan. It does not seem that unlikely.
Oh, I mean, yeah, there's a lot of things that make me, concerned. I think, I think Ghost21 might be the Twitter person again, who has done, a breakdown of Tsarukyan's, habits. Pointed out how when he fought against OAM, he has a tendency to slip to the right in open stance matchups towards the high kick, which is a big part of how Dariush keeps people upright. He is a very jab happy orthodox striker. He's constantly looking to establish his jab so that basically he can either kick people or take them down, or level change behind it. But Tsarukyan is constantly peppering people with the jab, and the question is obviously, as it always must be, is he going to do that in an open stance matchup?
Mm-hmm. Hasn't fought a lot of lefties.
And those which he had, those that he has fought have been, they've been fights that have not been characterized by any striking whatsoever, pretty much.
Yep.
They are the OAM fight and the Makhachev fight, which are essentially entirely grappling.
Yep.
So yeah, there's a real reason to worry, to be concerned that is Tsarukyan going to be able to effectively strike with Beneil Dariush? And I'm not sure that he is.
Yeah, I'll say up top that if there is one, I think, distinct strategic advantage for Arman Tsarukyan here, it is the one you would expect if you knew nothing about these fighters but their ages. And that is pace. Yes. That is the only thing that looks to me like a locked-in advantage, is that this is a 5-round fight. Dariush is usually the guy, like Khabib, for example, who's simply less tired than the person he's fighting when the fight goes long. He does get tired. And Tsarukyan simply doesn't. He's human, of course, but he has incredible conditioning. And he's a younger man. So you would expect that. Mm-hmm. That, to me, I think, is the thing that is going to be very helpful to him the longer this fight goes on. But another, what sounds like a very surface-level read, but I think is important to point out, I wouldn't say this is necessarily a guy who comes forward wins matchup, but I will say, I think if Arman Tsarukyan lets Beneil Dariush pressure him on the feet, he might really end up in trouble. And
yeah, apart from anything else, his best strikes are his kicks.
His kicks by far.
He's not going to be able to do that off the back foot.
Yeah. And he also just, you talk about him trying to establish his jab. He does use it, but I don't know. I find Tsarukyan striking, he's got quite a well-rounded striking game. He can do a lot of things, and he's a great athlete. He can do them quickly and decisively and quite well. But there is such a stark contrast between the like virtually like bloodless, methodicalness. What's the word for that? The methodical nature of his grappling game. In that he is really like, he's like an AI, you know, he's in there like, maybe I'll try a takedown that doesn't work for this early, but then I'm going to cycle through, I'm going to test different weaknesses, get to the ground, I'm going to methodically advance position, create just enough of a threat in one area that I can lock you down even further, like a boa constrictor. He is really, really methodical as a grappler. As a striker, it's just super clear that's not the thing he came up doing, because he is far more prone to just getting impatient and trying things. He is not nearly as methodical. Like, that came through in his fight with Damir Ismagulov. That is somebody I think of as like a jabbing king. And Ismagulov was able to get that jab home a lot and build his strikes much more consistently. And I think it was just the fact that Tsarukyan was younger and could put a massive grappling pace on him that won him that fight. So he's just a lot more disordered as a striker and less systematic. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yep.
And particularly when he's being pressured. As you said, it takes his kicks out of the equation. That is clearly the best part of his striking game. He is a really fast, dexterous kicker who is surprisingly powerful with like no wind up at all. He's a great kicker. But his boxing defense, when he is being backed up, is really quite poor. And he is prone to just getting cut off and run down and just hit clean by people who simply come after him with enough aggression. And the thing that saves him is the wrestling game. That's why nobody gets to sustain pressure on him, is because he can take them down. And if that's not the case against Beneil, I mean, that looks like potentially like a poisonous matchup. I think that could be really, really rough for Tsarukyan if Dariush can maintain any kind of pressure on him.
Yeah. That's why I find it so tough to call. Like, it's one of those ones where, like, I think maybe just the difference between it being a 5-rounder and a 3-rounder might end up deciding the fight.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm still, despite that Gamera performance, which was, as you said, like, it was shocking to me, frankly, how well Dariush was able to shut him down and just beat him up over 3 rounds, not gas out, not be struggling really much at all by the end of the fight. It's tough for me to square that with, the rest of Dariush's career, where he has gotten pretty tired when fights have gone late.
Yep.
It is an atypically good stamina performance from him.
Yeah, I think because he was pressuring and in control for so much of it. I mean, shit, if that had been a 5-rounder, very likely Gamrot would have started picking up takedowns just like he did against Tsarukyan, in the 4th and 5th rounds. Yeah. Younger man, 5-round fight. Like I said, that's the first thing that jumped out at me. But how to leverage that pace? I do suspect that Tsarukyan will come into this fight wanting to pressure. He must know that is something he has to do. And I think he can be a lot more effective with it than Gamrot was. When Gamrot tried to make the same adjustment late against Dariush, she was like, this getting backed up shit is for the birds, and tried to take the fight to Dariush. Tsarukyan is more potent, more varied a striker if he gets to come forward.
Yeah, and I think he's just a naturally more... He's just a naturally more aggressive fighter than Gamrot. He's just got that... Gamrot is incredibly mentally tough.
Oh, yeah.
But I think Tsarukyan just likes beating people up more than Gamrot does.
Yeah.
He's less worried to just get in there and swing. And with Dariush, that's always... that's one of the things which can just get to him, is you've got to be out, for all that Dariush is, again, a amazing defensive wrestler and offensive wrestling tactician and a really threatening offensive striker. He's also someone who's just had a long career of just getting dinged by absolutely wild strikers.
100%.
Because, look at him. When he gets into it, he will absolutely just go nuts.
It's because he's got no ass.
Yeah,
that's why he gets knocked out. He doesn't have the proper set of shocks for the rough terrain.
It's also because he's absolutely flailing like a madman half the time when he gets KO'd.
As Dariush himself has said in a number of post-fight interviews, with his voice sort of trembling from an adrenaline dump, he just goes into a murderous rage. He just gets really, really wild, and when he gets hurt, he will a cold rage in a way. Like, he will become very dangerous when he's been hurt, but his technique goes to shit. Like, no question about that. He starts brawling. And Tsarukyan hits hard enough to create some chaos. And I gotta say, I think
again, much worse strikers than Arman Tsarukyan have knocked out Beneil Dariush.
Yeah. Like, Alexander Hernandez did it.
Yep. A very nascent Alexander Hernandez. So what else? Dariush, I think, is going to be trying to create exchanges every time Tsarukyan kicks with him. He's really aggressive, I think, about enforcing his own offense after kicks. He'll always chase people after they kick.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it will quickly devolve into the exchanges on the feet will probably quickly devolve into a brawl.
Mm-hmm.
The question is just can Dariush keep ahead and maintain over someone like Tsarukyan for 5 rounds? How old is Dariush at this point? He's not actually as old as he looks, is he? He's 34.
34.
Weird.
Yeah. Got plenty of tread on the tires. 34, he's been fighting largely the best of the best going on a decade now.
Mm-hmm.
It would seem impossible to say that he's still in his prime, but then again, he was on a hell of a fucking run just before his last loss to the former champion in Chuck Yellow. So it's also hard to say that he's not still in his prime. He's been killing it.
Yeah.
It's a tough one to call, man.
I think I have to pick. Tsarukyan.
That's my gut.
I can't go away from. I can't sort of break from the idea that if he can just find 2 places where he can win, he can, or at least where he can force his game, then he can gas Dariush out. Because if he can land a bunch of body kicks as he did against Gamrot at the same time as he's going for takedowns, but I think it's going to be incredibly hairy. I'll be very impressed if it's a dominant win.
Oh.
Also, that might, if it is a dominant win, I might find myself thinking maybe Dariush is getting a little old now.
I guess that's a can't win in a small way for Tsarukyan. But
I think he's gonna go. I think he's gonna have to go through hell, basically.
Yeah, I think there will be at least good portions of this being a very difficult fight. My gut feeling was also Arman Tsarukyan. And like I said, I do think this is perfectly timed because I think we have seen the best striking from Tsarukyan yet in his last 2 fights.
Mm-hmm.
He has looked the most comfortable, the most confident, the most aggressive. And, against a big puncher in Joaquim Silva, a fight he was otherwise really dominating, but he did get badly hurt at one point. So it's not like he's been flawless. But it was good to see him go through that experience and come out, survive, and then come out in the following round with even more aggressive and completely undeterred. Not reckless, but just undeterred by that mishap. Otherwise, looking much more fluid. He still is frustratingly unstructured as a striker compared to his, again, it's just because the bar is so high for how methodical and systematic his approach to grappling is. That when
also you have to ask yourself, he doesn't basically have very much further left to climb, and then at some point it's going to have to be, like, you're going to have to fight Islam Makhachev if you beat many more people.
Yep.
And
if he wins this fight,
Islam
he's right.
Makhachev is exactly the case study
that
he is unfortunately going to be compared to, of someone who has been a sensational wrestler and grappler, and then has built themselves out into being a genuinely incredibly threatening striker as well.
And somebody whose striking is as good as it is because it's very, very principled and systematic. Who does not a flashy striker at all, really solid, in fact. And it's a hard bar to be compared to. Like you said, probably Tsarukyan would be a guaranteed someday champion in a division that did not include Islam Makhachev.
Yep, I think so. I mean, just due to the way that the style matchups break out.
Yeah.
You would be able to get a matchup, assuming that they fought each other in this kind of world. He would be able to get a matchup against someone who was flawed in that wrestling, grappling, wrestling, grappling, scrambling kind of way.
As it is, depending on how long Islam sticks around, it may be that Arman Tsarukyan somehow just never becomes champion because he's just simply not quite as good as Islam Makhachev. It could be an unfortunate little historical footnote at the end of the day, but like I said, I think he is peaking in his confidence and his well-roundedness. I hope that what he showed against Ismagulov and then even more so against Silva is an indication that, he's 27. I hope that's an indication that he is about to blossom as a fully well-rounded striker who is just comfortable and aggressive everywhere.
It's always amazing seeing that kind of development from fighters, And one of the things that we've seen from Islam and we've talked about so much, and it would be it would be amazing to see Arman take that final step up and reach that level. Yeah.
So I'm going to pick him. I think it really is dependent on his understanding that he needs to spend as much time as possible pressuring and pushing Beneil Dariush around, keeping him on the end of his kicks, and really, really investing in any kind of attack that sets him up for a cardio advantage in rounds 3, 4, and 5. So long as he understands that core strategic idea, though, I'm inclined to take him as the younger man, less fragile, and less prone to making big, insane, catastrophic errors.
Yep. And just able to ride them out more when he does.
Yep. So, fantastic matchup, and I really would not be shocked if Beneil Dariush pulled out the win here. I would be shocked, as you said, if Tsarukyan wins easily. I think it's going to be tough.
Yeah. And easily in a way that isn't,
Yeah, if he just sparks him out.
If he sparks him out, I'll just be like, well,
that happens.
It happens every now and again to Beneil.
Sometimes that happens. So that's one, that one I will accept. But if he somehow, beats him up on the feet and then takes him down and crushes him on the ground, that I am not expecting.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that will be very, very impressive.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's call it here. Put an end to segment 1. A fantastic main event, and the co-main event is looking really solid as well. After this break, we are going to talk about Jalen Turner versus Bobby Green, followed by Rob Font versus Davison Figueiredo. after this.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to this week's Heavy Hands. If you like what you hear, please consider pledging to support the podcast on Patreon. Patreon is basically continuous crowdfunding. You sign up to contribute a certain amount per month to help us with production costs and the like, and in return you get rewards ranging from a mention on the Heavy Hands website to a question or topic of your choice being discussed on the show. We have a lot more in the works to reward you for your help, and we appreciate every contribution. No amount is too small. Just head over to patreon.com and find how you can help out the only show dedicated to the finer points of face punching. Now let's get back to it.
Welcome back to Heavy Hands. We are talking about the co-main event of this fight night card now. Jalen Turner versus Bobby Green. Gotta say, and I'm not really complaining because I'm very happy with this matchup. Really enjoy watching both these guys fight. If you're gonna have to replace a fight, like, you could really do no better than this. Still a fantastic matchup, but knowing that it was not only supposed to be Dan Hooker, Bobby Green, a fight I would also very much enjoy seeing, but that it was supposed to be the rare non-title, non-main event 5-rounder, I would have liked to see that. I love a 5-round fight.
Yeah, but it does seem unfair to have it be a 5-rounder on short notice.
Absolutely. No, they made the right call.
Also, I haven't actually looked at this. Like, was Jalen Turner rescheduled from something else?
I don't know.
I don't think he was, right? No, he wasn't like booked for some other event around this time. He was just out after losing to Hooker. But is Jalen Turner going to make lightweight?
That's a good question.
I just found myself looking at this and being like, why is this not a catchweight?
That's a very good question, actually.
Like 3 weeks' notice just doesn't seem enough for Jalen Turner,
for
the biggest lightweight I've ever seen.
6'3", and despite being a career lightweight, whose Wikipedia weight is listed as 158 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
because he missed in his last fight.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if he's missed before, but he has had more than one catchweight at other points in his career. He has never easily made it to 155 easily.
Yeah. I am baffled as to why this isn't already a catchweight. I will be surprised if he makes it.
I will be surprised too. I'll tell you what, I would put a small amount of money on the prospect of this being a catchweight by the time the fight actually rolls around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, other than that, another really, really tricky one. Jalen Turner obviously coming off some disappointing losses. Both of them super close against pretty good fighters, Dan Hooker and Mateusz Gamrot. One of them being obviously a Mateusz Gamrot fight, so one where you can pretty much argue that he won it. Yeah, against Bobby Green, who I don't really know because he's been he just dusted like old terrible Tony Ferguson and then had like a reasonably competitive fight with Jared Gordon before headbutting him unconscious.
Yeah, he did vanquish Grant Dawson for us.
Oh, that's a good point, yes.
Yeah, he restored the universe to order, and a beating so profound it allowed us to utterly forgive Grant. He absolved Grant Dawson of his sins.
Yeah, and you know what? Afterwards, I saw Grant Dawson doing some kind of advert for, like, was it weed gummies or something?
Oh, great.
And he was saying, like, when Bobby Green isn't here to put me to sleep, I use these. And I was like, oh, that's actually quite charming.
He turned Grant Dawson single-handedly into kind of a charming figure. Immediately after the fight, because he slapped him, and Grant Dawson was like, he had nothing but respect and love for Bobby Green. I was like, oh, this guy's not so bad.
Yeah,
Having just spent
other people would say that we were uncharitable and mean to Grant Dawson, and but he was an all right guy all along.
Yeah,
But no, I think it's better for us that we take the line that Bobby Green injected coolness into him with his fists.
Yeah, and all the terrible, terrible things we said about Grant Dawson and various members of his family and inner circle were justified right up to that point.
Exactly.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah, once again, we're talking a super threatening young up-and-comer against a really crafty vet who offers a ton of very specific challenges for him.
Yeah.
And I do find myself thinking that I feel like Beneil Dariush is inherently a very tough matchup for Arman Tsarukyan. And I'm slightly concerned that Jalen Turner is maybe a bad matchup for Bobby Green.
Yeah. There are certainly aspects, I think, of Turner's style that, depending on how Green approaches this, but given what he normally does, his sort of default approach, it does seem like he might allow Turner to have the fight he wants, basically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is my because the main thing is that Bobby Green is a genuinely good defensive fighter who wants to draw overcommitments out of people by baiting them with his head and having crafty shifts disguised in his punches, so you don't know whether he's throwing a dipping jab or whether he's actually stepping through into a shifting left straight, all this kind of stuff, right? It is essentially about baiting the opponent to get an idea of what they're going to do, which he's able to do because, again, he's a very defensively sound fighter, and because he's big and long for lightweight.
Yeah.
The problem, I think, is that using head movement to avoid punches against Jalen Turner is going to be very, very dangerous because, one, Jalen Turner hits super hard.
Yep.
Two, Jalen Turner is fucking huge. And three, Jalen Turner does not overcommit on his punches unless he absolutely has to. And even in many ways, when he does absolutely have to, he is one of the rare MMA fighters who does not absolutely sell out on his punches.
Yep.
And so it is one of those situations where I'm like, is Jalen Turner going to just be able to kind of jab Bobby Green's head out of position and then, punch him once it has moved? And what are the risks of him? And the risks of him missing are simply not as high as they are with most other MMA fighters, because again, he can throw those punches from quite far away, and he's not going to commit on them and lose his balance. Pushing Bobby Green out of position will simply result in Bobby Green being pushed out of position. It won't be a win. Turner won't be stumbling off his feet after he throws.
Right. And will in fact is in fact really well suited to chaining strikes together. Given enough time to kind of build on somebody, he will come up with some really creative and very deliberate combinations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the thing with Turner is that he has internalized much more than the vast majority of fighters with his kind of natural power. The idea that he does not actually, because he's so powerful, he does not have to throw hard. It is a real credit to his maturity as a still young fighter that he knows he doesn't have to sell out to hurt people. And, that has been borne out in his fights. Even one with Gamrot, just touched him on the chin and hurt him and really should have won a round because of it and didn't for some reason. So that is really to his credit and means that probably just having defense is not going to be such an overwhelming advantage for Bobby Green as it sometimes is. There's also the fact, we were discussing this before we started here, that Turner is he is a natural pressure fighter, and really, really enjoys having people like responding to his initiative. He's really comfortable in that kind of fight. So not the kind of fighter who would get discouraged by missing a bunch of shots. If the opponent is responding defensively and making him work for it, that is going to like ignite his creative drive to come up with a way of punishing their patterns in their defense. It is not going to frustrate him. The thing that does frustrate him, I think we've learned, is when somebody just doesn't give a fuck and is willing to punch with him.
Yep. When someone just comes after him, and doesn't, whether it's striking or grappling,
like
when
a lot of pressure
literally
fighters,
just,
right?
Yeah. If someone just forces through a game plan, whether it's wrestling or striking, and just commits to it, it can run Jalen out of ideas. And I think it's tempting in these kind of situations to be like, oh, he's sort of getting broken by the pressure, because it has happened multiple times. But I don't think he's a fighter who necessarily gets broken. Like that Turner fight, the Hooker fight, he goes a little passive, but it's not so much. I didn't feel like when I was watching it was that like he was getting scared or like panicking so much as he was just starting to run on empty.
Yeah. Mental endurance.
A kind of different. Yeah, it was a kind of different. It was a different feel to what we were seeing. But he was, like, I guess like people like I guess I've given this as a classic example like a bunch of times, like Robbie Lawler or who's the other Johnny Hendricks, like guys that just they don't get mentally broken in fights, but they just have to take breaks. They just have to be able to recharge.
Yeah,
and I think he's just like that.
Yeah, and I think it's just like a lot of pressure fighters. Like if he's allowed to pressure the whole time, I don't think he really needs those breaks in the same way.
Yeah,
like I said, this sort of that positive stimulus of somebody reacting to his pressure, of him getting to hold an initiative. He likes that. It's a comfortable place for him to be. But like a lot of pressure fighters, the inverse is true. When somebody can actually just take it to him and put it on him, I agree with you. He doesn't break. He doesn't get like discouraged. He just gets mentally overwhelmed and can't keep up. And you can see this. I mean, you can see a very quick version of it. I think in his shockingly tough UFC debut fight against Vicente Luque, where he's in there slugging it out with Luque, and on short notice, a division up from where he normally fights. That being said, he's clearly much bigger than Luque because he's huge.
Because he's Jalen.
Because he's a 6'3" lightweight. But a 6'3" sometimes lightweight, let's be clear, sticking to our prediction that he is not making 155 for this event. But yeah, you can see it there, a much younger version of Jalen Turner. He gets into a brawl with Vicente Luque, and he goes past it before Luque does. Luque is just at home in a back-and-forth fight. He doesn't give a shit. It doesn't change. If anything, that kind of 50-50 double-edged fight like ignites an excitement in Vicente Luque that makes him want to win even more. He thrives on that, and Turner doesn't. He gets overwhelmed, he goes a little passive, and then he starts getting hit more, and then he gets knocked out. Extended that by getting more experience and improving as a fighter, but you can see that turn happen against Dan Hooker, where he hurts Hooker first. He probably wears himself out a little bit going for the kill. And then at a certain point in round 2, Hooker just storms after him. And you can see that Turner has like the appropriate sort of principled answers to this pressure. He'll go defensive. Hooker will get confident and get wrapped up in his momentum and start throwing a bunch. And Turner will do what, say, Robbie Lawler would have done. Use his defense, slip, and come back with some nasty counters. And what happens in that fight is that they hit Dan Hooker, and Dan Hooker doesn't stop throwing at him at all. he hits him right back and then keeps pouring it on. And this makes Turner increasingly passive. The more Hooker is pressuring him, the less capable he is of just keeping up with the flow of the exchange.
Yeah. Like, notably, it kind of happens at the end of round 2, and then the first maybe 2 minutes plus of round 3, he's hanging in there, like, within a very, it's still a very aggressive fight. He hasn't,
not
given
broken
up or anything.
Not broken.
Yeah. He's still fighting a very aggressive fight, but you can see that, like, it drains out of him over the course of that round.
Yeah.
He kind of comes back at the beginning of round 3 again, like Rose Namajunas, I guess, as well.
Sure.
These kind of he can recover after the bad ending of round 2, but yeah, it starts to drain back away afterwards. But the question is Bobby Green the kind of person who can do this?
This is all of this critique of
query.
This critique of Jalen Turner is really a roundabout way of saying it doesn't really seem like the kind of thing Bobby Green does to people.
No.
That in fact, Bobby
has
Green
occasionally, he has occasionally gone after people, but like mostly it's a very slow ramping up process.
Yeah. Oh, he will ramp up, guaranteed. The longer he's allowed to be in the fight, he will go after his opponent more and more. No question. That is just Bobby Green is a classic sort of slow starter, which is that he is counter to somebody like Jalen Turner. He's very comfortable with the idea of letting his opponent build an initiative and letting them pressure him.
Yeah, very true.
He's very patient because he has faith in his defense, and that to him is a way of figuring the opponent out. What are they going to try to do how are they going to try to end me? And in that process, I'm going to find the ways that I'm going to punish them. But we have seen him pay for it before against other hard-hitting and fundamentally aggressive fighters, right? Drew Dober, Rafael Fiziev until he gassed, and of course Dustin Poirier. All of these guys got to Bobby Green and exploited the fact that he was willing to let them pressure him. You were going to say?
Also, we've just seen Bobby Green lose tit for tat,
sure.
fights with people because he wasn't willing to push the aggression higher.
Yeah,
he's very much someone who lets the opponent's level of aggression dictate what kind of fight it's going to be.
Absolutely, yeah. And either
Thiago Moises is the classic example here, where it's like this fight is not decided on very many punches, essentially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but when opponents are aggressive, as we expect Jalen Turner to be, that can be either a good thing or a very bad thing for Bobby Green. There are certain unstructured, shall we say, immature kind of aggressive fighters, and Bobby Green schools them. Like Nasrat Haqparast was super aggressive against Bobby Green, and it's probably Green's greatest performance ever. He just took him to school. You can really pay for being over-aggressive against Bobby Green, but if you're comfortable and creative and something in you gets charged about the idea of an opponent backing up to the fence and trying to guess what you're going to do next, you're going to get chances to trick Bobby Green and to get him moving and to just punch through his counters. And yeah, that's the thing with Turner. He is there to be countered. Before he hurt Dan Hooker, the fight up to that point was kind of looking like a process of Dan Hooker sort of figuring out how to neutralize him off the back foot. He was doing an okay job of it. He was getting his jab in. He was anticipating Turner's right hands and countering with the left hook. He was peppering him with kicks all the while. If that head kick hadn't landed, who knows? We could be looking at this fight and having a much better feeling about Bobby Green's chances because Dan Hooker was doing a pretty credible job of just sticking and moving and countering against Turner. But therein lies the problem. The more he tried to have that kind of fight, the more opportunities he gave a creative, a hard-hitting, and big fighter in Jalen Turner time to figure out how to finally get to him. So, I don't know. I don't really have a very strong gut feeling here because if Dan Hooker can outbox you to an extent, Bobby Green can too, right? It's certainly.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just the fact that certain powerful natural pressure fighters have a habit of just breaking Bobby Green's game.
Yeah, and I think, as much as Bobby Green is a cooler, funner, like more technically coherent fighter than Dan Hooker, he's never achieved the heights of Dan Hooker.
It's true.
Like, he's, there's a tier of people that Dan Hooker has beaten or has competed with that Bobby Green hasn't, basically.
It's true.
They both beat Hack Brass pretty easily, but, Poirier knocks Bobby out, and Hooker had an incredible war with him.
Yeah.
Similarly, Felder is, for example, someone that I don't think Bobby Green's never really beaten anyone as good as Paul Felder. To be honest.
Yeah, probably not. Come close. Hey, like I said, Fiziev, very impressive performance.
Yeah, that's very true. That's probably his closest. But yeah, I just feel like Hooker is just a bit more. He's just a bit more potent. Just, worse.
Yeah.
In many ways, but just hits harder and is physically tougher.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those ones where I could certainly see Bobby outslicking him, but I think he just has to walk such a tightrope.
Yeah, I think I'll end up siding with you, but this one I'm not as confident in. I really do think those guys have overwhelmed.
I'm more confident in my pick for this one than I am in the Tsarukyan Dariush fight, I think.
I just feel like I have a slightly less clear picture of how they actually stack up. At least I feel like I have some pretty solid parameters for the main event. This one, I just don't know. It's not impossible for me to see Jalen Turner just getting jabbed a bunch and getting less pressure in as the fight goes on. But yeah, I will go with Jalen Turner. It just seems like a bad idea to let him dictate,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
that's
I think
really
it's just for me, it's the size and it's the ability to not throw his, to throw punches away, to move people around.
Yep. And possibly another good thing too, a willingness to aggressively transition into the clinch, into a striking clinch. Probably also a good way, particularly for a big guy like Turner, to come up with some answers to Bobby Green's boxing defense. Okay, here's a 1-2, you're going to slip that way. You're expecting the left hook, and then you're going to pop up and pivot away as the left hook misses. But what if instead I just sort of reach out and grab your head? Now do boxing defense, and maybe that's a way to exploit Bobby Green's style. Hit him with a big knee.
Yeah. Also, it's the one where I think it's the fact that it's a 3-rounder versus a 5-rounder makes me more likely to favor the quick starting younger person.
Yeah.
Over the, because I think with this one, it's conversely to Tsarukyan Dariush, this is one where the older guy is more likely to be picking up late rounds, I think.
Yeah.
But, don't think that's going to happen.
But then again, I just got to say, I am going to stick with my Turner pick, but you pick these two guys. If and it seems quite likely, if this devolves into a war, like, I think it might almost be better for Turner to kind of keep this a simmer and not push too hard. That is so often a thing that happens in Bobby Green's fights. People get overexcited and over-aggressive. Like, the one that really, really comes to mind are the fights with Lando Venata, where the harder he came at Bobby Green, and the Fiziev fight is another great example, the harder he came at him, the more locked in Bobby Green became. And barring like the Poirier, Drew Dober, like, okay, I catch him clean and knock him out, that ability to stay calm in a crazy war and get sharper and more assertive as the fight goes on is exactly what we talk about Jalen Turner not having. So if he goes too crazy and can't finish Bobby Green, can Jalen Turner survive a third round like the one Rafael Fiziev had with Bobby Green?
Very true. Probably. Yeah, I mean, I do think he should try and keep it. Yeah, should try and keep it at a simmer and try and win
just keep him contained,
Moises-esque fight.
Yeah, just keep him contained, and I don't know, man. That's what I mean. Like there seems like a strong dynamic in this fight of like of the kind of fight we're expecting to evolve and transform pretty dramatically as it goes on. I'm looking forward to it. I would love to have seen Green Hooker over 5 rounds, but I think this is a fantastic replacement matchup. And I'm going to stick with just picking the young guys. But I don't know. Yep. I have serious reservations about picking somebody still as relatively inexperienced and sort of one-dimensional as Jalen Turner confidently in a striking match with a guy as classy as Bobby Green.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's definitely one where I'm a little concerned.
Yeah. All right, well, let's take one more break. When we come back, we've got bantamweights, Rob Font, Davison Figueiredo. Maybe we'll touch on a couple other things. We'll see. But certainly, Davison Figueiredo's bantamweight debut after this.
Financial support is fantastic, but there are other, even easier ways to support Heavy Hands. Perhaps the best is by spreading the word. We know our fan base. You're all cool, popular people with serious social media presences. You're tastemakers and trendsetters. Okay, there are 1 or 2 of you that don't fit that description. You know who you are, but no matter what, you can always help us out by telling folks about the show. And you can also give us a positive rating and review on iTunes and Stitcher, things like that. We rely on word of mouth and positive feedback to grow and improve, so thank you very much for your time and your help. Now, back to the show.
Okay, welcome back to the show. Davison Figueiredo, Rob Font. I actually thought I was mistaken about this being Figueiredo's bantamweight debut. I was like, this guy's has struggled with weight cuts before. He's, always been a fairly big and powerful flyweight. But no, aside from missing weight for his title fight with Joseph Benavidez, the first of 2 fights, he made weight for the second one. Aside from that, he has just been a straight-up flyweight his entire career. So this is well and truly his first time in the bantamweight division. And, it is certainly a case, Phil, of a fighter changing weight classes. I mean, probably for valid reasons. I think he really probably is just struggling to consistently make 125 at his age. But also, we are always wary, with good reason, about fighters changing weight classes late in their career. And this is a case of that phenomenon happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of these ones where, I just don't think Figueiredo can safely or healthily, let's say, happily make the flyweight limit anymore. I think it's very unlikely that he gets a title shot, and less so that he wins one. So sure, why not try and see what it's like being, not cutting a ton of weight. Yeah, I think it's also just a question of where does someone like Deiveson Figueiredo go? And basically, they just have to go and have cool, fun action fights because he doesn't have the style to insulate himself from. He doesn't have really, the sort of technical acumen to insulate himself from his opponent's offense and have like a long Aldo or Bobby Green-esque post-prime.
Yep.
He's just going to have to sort of cash in his chips and have violent fights with bantamweights, many of whom are, as big or bigger than him and huge punches and like massive offensive threats, which is presumably going to be like quite troubling for him.
It's Rob Font. Right?
Yeah.
Someone who's bigger than him, capable of exploiting some of Figueiredo's glaring defensive liabilities, and massive puncher, check. So, seems like basically a rough matchup that is characteristic of what you would expect Figueiredo to run into in this division, right?
Yeah. I'd also find it weird that, like, in many ways, Rob Font is the closest thing you could get to Brandon Moreno's striking style at bantamweight.
True. Yeah. Super jab-centric.
Very jab-centric, very much like traditional, earmuffs, high guard kind of approach. Moreno tends to be sort of chopping right hands, and Rob Font tends to be like uppercuts and knees, but yeah, they've got like weirdly similar, and obviously, Moreno is very much like got the broader base and so on. But yeah, they're about as close as about as similar as you could get.
Mm-hmm.
And on the one hand, you could be like, man, Figueiredo's fought this basic style a ton. He must have loads of tricks ready for it that Font has not really seen.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, the general trend of Deiveson Figueiredo's last however many fights is not an encouraging one.
Yeah, I mean, I would describe the sort of the arc of his championship saga with Moreno as erratic at best, right? Certainly showed that he could sort of make changes and come up with answers, but also just very shaky. It's just super hard to look at those fights and be like, oh, this was a process of Figueiredo figuring out exactly how to deal with Brandon Moreno. I don't think you could argue he did that successfully, even if there were some moments of success, certainly, and one win in there.
Yeah, I mean, mainly the fight is mostly characterized by the realization at one point that Moreno could hurt Figueiredo.
Yep.
And which then caused him to get massively overconfident, but which Figueiredo just never really seemed to recover from.
Exactly, yeah. Figueiredo seemed, even when he was making adjustments, it was sort of like they were safety adjustments, like built around not letting Brandon Moreno hurt him, which is like a style breaking realization, I think, for him. Because before that, probably his most well-known fight was the one with Pantoja, which is a fucking war, where he is just eating the biggest shots of one of the division's hardest hitters, just willingly, just scarfing him down, no trouble. That was the kind of durability he used to possess. I will say, my hope is that the obviously difficult weight cut has been part of Figueiredo seeming so much more fragile in his last few fights, and that maybe moving up to 135, he's going to eat a shot, realize it didn't hurt him, and we will see his confidence blossom, and he can go to war once again. But at 35 years old, the tail end of a ton of wars, not getting a light touch in his first move up in weight at all. I think that even if his durability is bolstered by the weight class change, his mind might not know it.
Yeah.
Is right? Like, he may have just already internalized the idea that he's no longer a young man and cannot have young men's fights. And he might be right about it. I mean, I don't know, but I would be very surprised if he did, in fact, not only show that he is just as durable as he used to be, but that he fights the way he used to as a result of that. I think I think it's changed him. The process has changed him.
Yeah, and I think the problem is that for this particular matchup, I think he needs to. Can you let me think about that a little bit more? Because on the one hand, I was going to say, like, he needs to be a very specific kind of Deiveson Figueiredo, because often, his level of aggression is kind of, again, he's one of these fighters where he sort of leaves it up to his opponent how highly paced they want the fight to be, how quick paced they want it to be, how violent they want it to be, because he won't actually throw a ton left to his own devices.
Yep.
With the exception being, and he's a bit spatially aimless, with the exception of the first Brandon Moreno fight where he walked him down.
Yep.
And was genuinely enforced his game. It is his best performance. Bar none.
Yeah.
Maybe you could say, Benavidez too, in that he just...
Yeah, he's had wipeouts. But
shot Joe B, but...
A full 5-round performance where he really looks good pretty much the whole time. And definitely, probably should have gotten the win. Yeah.
Oh yeah, easily. Yeah, even with the point deduction, it's a 1-round fight.
I think that
Moreno.
That is the peak performance of his career. Yes.
So what I was thinking, and I'm realizing now that I might be wrong, is that he needs that kind of performance, because the issue with Rob Font is that Rob Font will simply outscore him. Rob Font will just hit him with a bunch of jabs, and even if Deiveson Figueiredo is walking through them, he will be getting, he will be numerically behind on points and pace.
And if he doesn't pressure, he'll also get kicked, and he's going to get hit to the body. There's going to be just a lot of variety to deal with, and the ever-present jab, for sure.
Yep. But then on the other hand, I was like, Chito Vera, though. Chito Vera, Rob Font.
Uh-huh.
Or indeed, Jose Aldo.
Yep.
Neither of those guys kept pace with Rob Font. So, yeah, maybe I was wrong. Maybe he doesn't need to be, super aggressive, but he does definitely need to be able to calmly weather the storm and counterpunch with Rob Font.
But this is where the age and the blossoming neuroses that come with that, the traumatic experiences of the Brandon Moreno saga, the first move to weight class, this is where these X factors all become very meaningful, because he doesn't have Jose Aldo's defensive acumen or really his class as a counterpuncher. Though he can counter effectively and powerfully, but he doesn't meet that bar. Nor am I confident anymore that he has Chito's straight up durability and poise. Both just completely unbreakable.
Also, he's gone from being the biggest, one of the biggest people in his weight class to just a regular sized person in his weight class now. And Chito is 100% one of the biggest people in his weight class.
But if it was the Figueiredo who fought Pantoja and he moved up, and I had we shuffled time around, and I had also just seen Rob Font lose to Chito, then I'd be like, hey,
100%.
He's just going to tank his shots and not care. That was the thing, is that Chito, he just was utterly undeterred. He felt he was winning the entire time. This is the frustrating thing about Chito sometimes, that he's just you can't convince him he's not going to win the fight. So it just doesn't matter how much success you have. And truly against Rob Font, he basically manifested that reality. It's no, you're not beating me. I'm going to hit you with something that nearly kills you once per round. And he did.
Yep.
It's it is the age and the weight class change and all these things. The fact that I have seen Figueiredo in a at least nominally similar matchup with Brandon Moreno go through what looks like a process of having his confidence broken and realizing that he's mortal and fighting as if he's, if anything, like kind of fragile. And then going in there against somebody like Rob Font, who can do a lot of the same things, but let's agree, is much more potent than Brandon Moreno.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some people lost sight of this, including perhaps us to an extent, around Font's fight with Adrian Yanez. Yanez himself lost sight of the fact that, yeah, there are ways Rob Font loses fights that are pretty easy to understand, but he is himself a very dangerous fighter. He's not just the fragile guy who don't make the mistake of thinking that Chito Vera is representative of how the average elite fighter can absorb Rob Font's best punches. He hits like a truck. So I have to pick Rob Font. I just don't think there's any way around it. Like, I just don't trust Deiveson Figueiredo. And yeah, even if there are two really, the Chito fight is really representative of a way that Figueiredo could definitely win. I just don't know that I trust Figueiredo to have the confidence to pull that off when in between these power shots he's needing to land to win rounds, he is just getting laced up with jab after jab after jab and getting hit to the body and having to worry about what comes after the jab. And I have to take Rob Font.
Yeah, and I remembered when Font fought Sergio Pettis, and I was like, oh yeah, this is, Sergio's going to have a real chance in this fight because he's just a genuinely like really good striker. He's, he can kick. He's a much better boxer than his brother and so on. And Rob Font was like, man, I love fighting flyweights. This is the best thing ever.
Yeah.
Just stranded this dude
Free
to the
jabs.
limit of his reach. Like just throwing his stupid giant fists at him from like 10 miles away, just jabbing him up. And Sergio couldn't get it on him at all.
Yep.
And yeah, it did really bring home to me like the physical difference between like flyweight and bantamweight. It's a not unproportional like amount of your body weight at that 10 pounds at that weight. And and notably, those people who have really hurt Rob Font or have bullied him have been huge bantamweights.
Mm-hmm.
Jose Aldo, obviously famously struggled to make featherweight. Cory Sandhagen and Chito Vera are all absolutely massive.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think that like given the ability to just run his sort of Rob Font, jab, jab, uppercut, hockey punch game, I think he's just going to rack up lots of point leads.
Yep. Just to
maybe
put
even, and as you said, maybe even hurt Figueiredo. I think that's the main question I find myself saying, like, is if Deiveson gets badly hurt, I'll just be like, oh no.
Yep.
He's not long for these kind of fights.
That is the core reality of Font's two tragic losses to Aldo and Vera, is that he was just not able to hurt either of them. And if that is not the case, good luck winning either of those fights. Not going to happen. Way too much output to deal with unless you are, in fact, the only one scoring really significant damage. Just to put some hard numbers to it, Rob Font is 3 inches taller and has 3.5 additional inches of reach on Deiveson Figueiredo. He is going to be significantly larger.
I actually genuinely thought they were going to be about the same size.
No, he is going to be significantly bigger. So, that's enough reason for me to pick him. Until proven otherwise, until I see Deiveson Figueiredo at 35 years old recapture the confidence of his youth, it seems like a somewhat unlikely prospect.
Mm-hmm. Got to agree.
All right, couple of quick mentions. I mean, we did talk before the show about Clay Guida, Joaquim Silva, which is like we just discovered something funny because I was looking at this saying I kind of like this matchup because, back in the day, you'd pick Clay Guida every time. Joaquim Silva's not a particularly good wrestler. Arman Tsarukyan just completely crushed him on the floor. Then again, even Arman Tsarukyan had a really hard time effectively controlling Joaquim Silva early in the fight. He had to put a lot of effort in to sort of take the steam out of him because he's a great athlete. Silva is.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I was like, Clay Guida, good style matchup, but much younger, stronger guy. And then you looked at Clay Guida's record and discovered something very strange.
I was like, when is the last time Clay Guida beat someone in his prime? Because I've just got this memory of him fighting all these old dudes,
yeah.
And I was like, it seems to go back for quite a long. I was really struggling to remember the last time Clay Guida beat someone who was undeniably in their prime, and we looked through it. I think the person we can agree on is Anthony Pettis in 2011.
Yeah.
Hatsuhioki in 2013, definitely on the downside. Kawajiri, absolutely on the downside. Robbie Peralta, again, Mm-hmm. And then just a bunch of losses. Eric Koch, no. Again, very much out of the prime of his career.
Joe Lozon, 2017.
BJ Penn.
BJ Penn in 2019.
Penn in 2019. Michael Johnson in 2021. Leo Santos in 2021. And Scott Holtzman in 2022. It is genuinely shocking.
Now, I will say, to his credit, in matchups, he is also past his prime. He is also an old man.
Oh, yeah.
I think Clay Guida's prime ended the day he fought Chad Mendes in 2013. That to me always stood out in my mind.
Even then, people were like, he's starting to lose it a bit.
Yeah, it was the first time he'd ever been knocked out. I mean, that was his...
No, I mean, even going into that fight.
Sure.
I think people...
it stands out in my mind as a point of no return. Keep in mind, that was his 45th fight. In 2013, he had his 45th fight and was knocked out for the first time. I mean, if anything, as silly and somewhat embarrassing as this realization is, it does also sort of force you to confront just how good Clay Guida has been for so long.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he is someone, if you think about, I mean, how many champions has Clay Guida beaten? At least 2.
Yeah.
UFC champions.
I mean, he successfully defeated the entire sport of MMA with Greg Jackson's help. Back when he fought Gray Maynard. He actually killed the sport in his fight with Gray Maynard. And fuck, how long ago was that?
Long ass time ago.
When did he fight Gray Maynard? When was that? I can't find it. There's too many fights on this record.
But yeah, I mean, so he is someone who's had remarkable longevity. But yeah, also, when people talk about whether there's they should have a senior citizen circuit kind of, in MMA, it's there. It's fighting Clay Guida.
And he is the champion of the senior circuit. No question.
He really is. Yeah.
He's beaten all these old
undoubtedly.
Dudes. But counter to that, all the younger guys have beaten him. All of them. And also Jim Miller.
Yes.
Who was also old at the time. But yeah, Charles Oliveira, Bobby Green, Mark Madsen, Claudio Puelles, and Rafa Garcia. To an extent, this is a list of declining quality of young guys who have still managed to beat Clay Guida by, not being old. So anyway, we're picking
my assumption
Silva.
Is simply that, going with the theme of the episode.
Yeah, picking the young guys.
Joaquim Silva is simply going to rip his head off.
Yeah, that seems like a pretty good bet. Any other things you want to mention? Do you have any thoughts on Sean Brady, Kelvin Gastelum?
So weird.
Yeah,
it's so weird I don't know what to pick in that fight. I genuinely don't know.
I don't think Kelvin Gastelum is back. I'm sorry to say it, folks. I think he still has many of the qualities that he used to have, which is why he was so tooth and nail with a guy like Chris Curtis. Even then, I did not think that was a clear win.
I didn't think he won at all.
Yeah, and it was, as has always been the case, totally dependent on Gastelum's ability to just eat absolutely every shot he gets hit with, because he got hit a lot and really hard and clean. Without that durability, no one would be dreaming of talking about Kelvin Gastelum being back. He certainly hasn't evolved in any significant way that I can see. Little flashes here and there, sprinkling in new techniques, but really it was just a brawl where he just leaned on his chin and it worked for him.
Yes.
But then again, Sean Brady really only does one thing.
Yeah. I'm gonna pick that as being enough. I'm just gonna pick Sean Brady.
Young guy who does one thing. Yeah.
Yeah, he does one thing well, and I at least used to trust Kelvin Gastelum to be a good scrambler.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if I even trust him to be that as he ages out, just because he was very, very quick.
I mean, hey, if he puts a ton of pressure...
I trust him to be lightning fast in the scrambles and to have very fast hand speed. And I just don't know how much I trust either of these things to, continue to be there. It just looked like a worse and worse grappler over time, frankly.
I will say, Sean Brady just had a fight with Bilal Muhammad, who ate every shot he threw, put pressure on him, and was difficult to out-wrestle, if not impossible for him, actually. So good defensive wrestling and great durability. All it needs is for Kelvin Gastelum to be really aggressive, which he sometimes is. And if he comes into this charged up like he was for the Israel Adesanya fight, if he truly believes, as I think he does, that he is back, he could definitely beat Sean Brady. Because Sean Brady does not like when he can't wrestle somebody who just doesn't give a fuck about getting hit by him. They just don't respect him.
Mm-hmm.
He broke. I mean, getting TKO'd by Bilal Muhammad, no disrespect to one of my longtime favorite fighters, but not a great sign. Because that man has not TKO'd somebody since... I mean, literally, how far back do I have to
go?
I
don't. Has he ever TKO'd anyone before that?
TKO in 2022. He TKO'd Augusto Montano in 2016.
Nice.
Basically, pre-UFC, he would occasionally, attritively knock somebody out. So... it's a winnable fight, I think, for Kelvin Gastelum, just because Sean Brady is an imperfect prospect. I guess by that metric, it makes it another pretty good matchup. I think it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, Kelvin Gastelum has been losing to people, but they have mostly been very good.
Yeah, no question. So I don't know.
He's still not that old.
I'm not gonna lock myself into a pick on that one because I got to record the vivisection tomorrow, and if I just stick with what I picked here with a moment's thought, then I might. Zane will talk me out of that pick probably instantly. So
I respect your cowardice. Yeah,
caginess. That's how I prefer to think of it.
Yeah, that sounds better. Craftiness. I'll pick Sean Brady. Whatever.
Okay.
I think he'll just they're just going to realize that Calvin's really bad at grappling now.
To your funeral, bitch. All right.
Oh no, I'm so invested in this matchup.
You'll never live this down. All right. Well, that'll do it. Just a really strong lineup for a fight night card. Looking great. It's everything you want, it's prospects, it's a couple high level divisional sorting matchups, and then a whoever wins this is probably getting a title shot. At least one of them is probably right in the title picture in the main event. Really solid across the board. And I enjoyed talking about it. I hope you all out there enjoyed listening to us talk about it. And that will do it for this week's episode of Heavy Hands. Find us on Twitter, as always, at Evil Greg Jackson, at Boxing Bush. Find me on Blue Sky. I've been posting a little more over there. I've got like no followers, but that's fine. I suppose if you need an invite, hit me up on Twitter, and I will invite you if you want to get on that other platform. It's kind of nice over there, Phil. You know?
Yeah, but I think what you're missing is that I'm very lazy.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean, really, I've started using it because I've kind of stopped using Twitter very much. I just really glance at it for fight stuff. And we'll post over there on fight nights because that everyone's still over there. But otherwise, I kind of hate it. So if you want to have a pleasant, normal human interaction with me online, find me on Blue Sky at King Typo. And hit me up for an invite if you want one. Otherwise, we'll be back next week. I haven't looked ahead at the schedule. What's around the corner? We will be talking...
no, me neither. It's probably going to depress me.
We will be talking about... Oh, no. Song Yadong versus Chris Gutierrez.
Ooh.
Not bad.
What did...
Anthony...
Wasn't that meant to be Piotr Jan?
I think maybe it was.
Well, this is good. I would have rather had Yard, but, whatever.
No, apparently not. Unless that was just provisionally talked about. Wikipedia doesn't mention Piotr Jan's name.
Okay. Yeah,
all
right.
I'll say is that Anthony Smith is fighting Khalil Roundtree, and they did not make that the main event. So I think we're off to a good start.
That is amazing.
Junyoung Park, Andre Muniz.
For an
Nasrat
Apex card,
Haqparast, Jamie Malarkey. I've seen worse, folks.
Yeah?
I've seen worse. Tatsuro Taira, Carlos Hernandez. Hey, there's like 3 interesting fights in this card at the very least. So we'll have a good time talking to you about that next week. Until then, if you came here today for the finer points of face punching, you came to the right place. This has been Heavy Hands.